Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Creatives Ignite. I am excited, really excited. One reason we're starting a series off that's all about product design. And I've always felt like an idiot where product design is concerned because I didn't really know what it was. And I was for sure, if I didn't know what it was, I for sure wasn't one of these. And I think we're going to debunk. There's a lot of different definitions. And the other reason is because I get to kick off this series with one of my design babies. And so Drew Hard was one of my students a long time ago. He learned from a lot of other people, and he's going to tell us about his career path because he was just a regular graphic designer. That's what I taught him to be, was a regular graphic designer, right? And we are featuring two of me and the chicken are featuring two of our alumni in this series. And I love that. So Drew, you're in DC. I'm super excited to see you. Last time I saw you, you had more hair, but I like bald people. So I'm good. But you are in DC and you are a product designer.
I am.
Okay. So you started in Mississippi, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So give them a little bit of your background. And because I think one thing I'm trying to kind of do is debunk what product design is. And we're going to hear a lot of different people define it differently. And I'm excited to see. But sometimes if you didn't ever think of yourself as a product designer, maybe you see some of the things that Drew does, or some of the things that Rex does, or Sophie and Harrison do, or Richard does, all these people. And you're like, oh, I've done some of that too. Or then maybe you could look for other jobs. If you're looking for postings, you might be like, oh, I'm going to read this product designer job opening because maybe I don't know what it is. Or maybe I used to not know. And now Drew's a product designer and I do a lot of the same thing Drew's doing. So, all right.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah. Okay. So give us your background.
Sure.
Your career stuff.
So I was one of the lucky bunch that graduated in 2009, right at the recession. And I did what every good millennial does. I moved back in with my parents because I wasn't able to find a job right away. And through a series of circumstances, I ended up working at a print shop in D'Iberville, Mississippi, just a little small mom and pop print shop that did a lot of work for the casinos. And so it was a great job because I got to learn a lot about just colors and papers and all that sort of stuff, and working with other people's files and fixing other people's files, which gave me a lot of insight on to like what else was coming out at the time. And from there, I actually got a job at Red Square, which is now called Good Giant, I believe. And one of the reasons why I was able to get that job is I actually did have an internship while I was in undergrad at South for about a summer. And then the second reason why I was able to get hired was just through the connections I made, but also they had just won a big casino client. So I have a lot of casino background work where I was hired on as a big tranche of people to come in and work on the brand new big casino client that was based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I was there for about 2.5 years, working my way up from a production artist was my official title. And so what that meant is I did not make a lot of key art or anything like that. And usually key art was handed out to me. And then I took that and propagated it out to the different formats, whether that be a billboard or a poster or what have you, anything and everything I was in charge of, or not in charge of, but I was one of the people working on a lot of that materials. And then then eventually, was there long enough that I kind of bumped myself up a little bit. I think my title was like junior art director, I believe. It was not really an art director position, but from there I was able to co-opt a shift up to Knoxville, Tennessee, into a very similar advertising studio called the Tombras Group. I believe it's now just called Tombras. Very similar. It was literally a father-son operation up there, just like Red Square was with Rich. And got to work on bigger clients, got to do things for like McDonald's. We had a McDonald's regional account there. Daimler trucks, Michelin tires, stuff
But
like that.
traditional advertising,
But
maybe there was
still,
some
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
social media or online web
exactly.
ads, maybe, but
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
still working in that
in
and
print.
a lot of people were
Yeah,
mainly doing print. There wasn't
yeah.
so much.
Right. Right. Yeah, this is a time where like if any I did, talk to the web guys while I was up at Tombras and they were still using Photoshop to do their layouts for their stuff or even Illustrator in some cases. But it was at Tombras where I did kind of make a shift more towards digital and because I've just getting to know people, being social with those around me and just being interested in what everybody else was doing in their lives, was able to help out with a bit more things, such as working on Michelin tires. There was an initiative that came through where they wanted to launch some new app, and I got to work on the website and got experience in there. And that experience cascaded into more experience for doing the Moon Pie website and stuff like that. So
So
it
being
just
willing to work and try
being
different
willing, yeah,
things. You are a learner, so you love to learn and you're just easy to get along with. You
yeah,
were just asking questions
yeah,
and trying to be a good colleague, right?
yeah.
Helping out
Always kept
when
my ear to the ground and just listening, not eavesdropping, but listening to like what others were doing and being like, hey, I've got a quick moment. I'd love to see what you're working on and give some like if they wanted it, give feedback, but also ask like, hey, I can make a little graphic for you if you need it over there. Like that would be kind of cool. Stuff like that. And from there, I was able to I started getting tired because it was still advertising, and I just a lot of the clients that I've been working on, as y'all heard, was working on casinos. Did not like working on casinos because they're casinos. And then same thing at the Thomas Group, they started to court like cigarette companies and stuff like that. And it's like, well, kind of tired of the environment and kind of tired of the clientele that we're working on. I'm ready for the next thing. And so by pure happenstance, I had actually applied to this job up here in DC uh, at EverFi. And I literally mean by happenstance because I think I was just clicking easy apply on LinkedIn to everything that was coming across. I was like, oh, it's fine. As long as I can talk to somebody, then I can probably navigate an interview and work my way through it. And just like I got very lucky because the EverFi was an environment where it was a company that had been, I think, operational for about 3, 4 years before they started bringing in internal teams. Originally, it was just started by 3 guys that used vendor work to build their product base and had been building their product base for a number of years, but got to that point where they couldn't sustain it anymore, and so they hired the woman who eventually would be my boss to be their in-house creative director. And she had a very similar background to me, like no product design background at all. The reason why she got in is because her former boss got hired on as head of product. And so uh, I got like just a bit of luck coming in to a team that had very similar backgrounds, and we discussed things. And it was one of the reasons why I felt confident making the jump is because she had such a similar background to me. When she explained like what she needed for the products and what she needed from me, she was able to couch it in those terms of a graphic designer, of just like, hey, I'll need these types of graphics and some layouts and stuff like that. But what I really need is I need somebody that can distill information and take complex ideas and distill them down into little things. And what I was able to do was talk about like, well, with my advertising background, that's really all you're doing is you're trying to sell people on something. So you're taking the idea, which is the product, and you're trying to distill it down into an action for somebody else to do. And that's all product design really is you're trying to just get somebody to click that button to do that thing over there. And it's very similar.
and it's some of the skills you had from the other jobs, the printer.
The printer,
Um,
yeah.
it's the your attention to detail, but also your because you and I've talked, it's your ability to kind of look at the whole picture, the bigger picture. So because you've done ad campaigns, you think
Mhm.
about the whole campaign, not just one ad. You know,
Piece
you're
of it. Yeah.
thinking, yeah, you're
Right.
thinking about things, how it's going to work, how people, it is driving an action. So
Mhm.
in product design of what you were going to be doing, um so I think that there's some hope for people who are like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I could do this then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had a really good environment where people could talk to you in a way that made you understand because they were using similar terms from regular traditional print graphic design.
Mhm.
But it was also, was there any audience or user? Because at some point of things that I've hear people say product
Mhm.
design, like I said earlier, it felt like it was industrial design or it was like user experience or is it
Mhm.
user interface? And yes, and yes, and yes, maybe, right?
Yes. Right.
But I think
Uh,
I think it can be convoluted and you'll
yeah.
maybe see product designer and you really have to read the description of the job to know what
Yeah.
they're wanting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. You'll see one of the best things to do is when you're looking at a job, look at the company that is you looking to hire you and look at what they do because fintech is very different from edtech is very different from, you know, you name it. But because just the driving force is very different, the it all boils down to money and how they make that money. But when I was at EverFi, it was I was their business model was such that the people that I produced materials for, the product itself, were not the people that were paying us. Their model was very much they would go to banks and say like, "Hey, we have this product that can teach your clients about all these different things about financial education. You buy it and we'll onboard people." And we were kind of a one-stop shop SaaS company for that kind of thing. And that cascaded out to similar fields where we had an entire K-12 curriculum where it was the same thing. We didn't go to the schools to sell it to
Mm,
them. We went to the banks and we were like, "Hey, you have all this Community Reinvestment Act money that you need to spend. We have the product ready made. You just give us the money and we'll make sure it gets distributed out to the schools." And so, um, yeah, so the audience has changed drastically where I'm working with at EverFi, I was working with learners all the time. And so, we would have really busy periods leading out of summer and into summer for different reasons. Uh, and that was very different from when I was working at Claire, which I came after EverFi, which was a fintech company
what does
that
that mean, fintech? I am feel
so
like an
so
idiot.
financial tech.
Oh.
So it was a not a bank. It is a banking application, and there's a very legal distinction in there
So,
where yeah, go
oh, I
ahead.
was going to ask a question. So at EverFi, what kind of things were you making? So this is
Yeah,
again, we're like getting into the nitty gritty. You
yeah,
know me, I know you. I
yeah,
want you to tell us the truth, Drew. So, like,
yeah.
were you doing sales decks or pitch decks, or you were doing
Nope.
emails, or what kind of
Yeah,
things were you designing?
yeah. So when I first started, what I was designing was they had a product offering called At Work, which was designed to be a series of mini courses that you could go and log into via, your if
Web
like I said,
browser or
if
something?
yeah, your web browser. So if your bank had bought our product, they would offer it to you, and you could go in and learn all these different things. And each it was a series of lessons in this one product that taught you anything from like very simple things like what is a savings account all the way up to like what is a PMI in relation to a mortgage and all that fun stuff, or like how an HSA can actually be a savings account when you're
Yeah.
like a regular savings account once you reach a certain age, that sort of thing. And so literally I did not work on the platform itself. I worked on the literal products. So usually the way that would work is there would be a SME that I would work with. A SME is an acronym for subject matter expert. They're the ones that hold all the keys with all the information of like what needs to be done and what learning objectives needed to be met. And I also worked with a writer who would be kind of like the go-between between a SME, who's a very technical writer, to a copywriter, which is kind of more like person that takes all that technical information and puts it into language that,
A normal person could understand.
a
Yeah.
normal person's going to understand and also not be bored to tears by. And then my job was then to take that and make it a visually enjoyable experience and also uh, an interactive experience that made sense. And so, a lot of things that I would have to design and think about was, okay, how best can I show the accrual of interest in a savings account if you were to leave it for so long? And so designing these little interactions to hand off to a user for them to play with and see that visualization happen
So
was like a big part of it.
were you really financially savvy? Not like,
Absolutely
but like,
not.
did you know about how finances work? Right. So
Yeah,
sometimes
no,
it's
because
good
that
to
wasn't,
know less because then you're
yeah,
like, I'm confused. I don't know
yeah,
where right. It's,
right.
there's sometimes I feel like maybe people wouldn't apply for jobs because they're like, well, I don't know anything about
Hmm.
financial, but maybe that's a benefit, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, because there was actually quite a few times where I would be working with the SME or the copywriter and just be like, hey, what you gave me for this page is a little hard to understand. What if we change the language a little bit here or we add a little bit here because then we can reference this piece of information that, we talked about a couple pages earlier, but we need to re-reference it now because now it's really relevant. Stuff like that. Um,
And
and
even
just not
creating
being afraid to
graphics.
like, yeah, and creating the graphics to kind of help illustrate that was a lot.
So
Um,
do you think because you weren't a product designer before, do you think that there was that in between place where you weren't as confident to say, hey, I'm confused? Or were you like, that was typical for you as a designer? Like, if I'm confused about what my plumber client is telling my people to do in this thing, I'm like, you already had that
yeah,
confidence coming in, say, hey, this is confusing for a
yeah,
normal viewer.
right. I one thing I learned and that I still stand by today is like don't pretend like I know anything. Always ask questions early and often and it's okay like to not know everything because it's not your job to know everything. I
Yeah.
mean, it's your job to know how to produce the materials and lay things out that in a coherent way for users and know that maybe you shouldn't have decimal pixels in your layouts, they should be whole pixels because that's not the other person's job to know that you're a part of a team and it's okay if you don't feel like you've been given all the information. I very regularly was like would pull people to the side and just be like, hey, I don't know what you mean by this, man.
But in a way, that's
Which
good because then
yeah,
you're going to be helping that customer that also doesn't know. And
right.
so it's a benefit. I always feel like we should be raising our hands more and saying,
Yeah,
I don't understand. And I
yeah.
think sometimes when people are starting in a new career or they're pivoting to something,
It's hard.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah, you feel like, should I
You
know
feel like
this
you need to
already?
come in and be a value add immediately when, you know, it's not always the case. You got to be comfortable with not knowing and not being the hot shot all the time.
Right.
It's, you like because by not knowing and by asking questions, there would oftentimes, yeah, I would be able to raise an idea of like, oh, what you just said there, that makes a lot of sense to me. But what if we just like tweak it a little bit? Because then I think it might add a little bit more. And, being open to offering my opinion, but also important not to be married to your opinion as well, in so far that like when you get shot down or somebody tells you like, no, that's just not how it's going to be this time. Okay, all right, let's move on to the next page
But
and
you
work
had
on
already
that.
learned that. I mean, you were easy. You took critique well in school. So sometimes
Yeah.
people don't do that. I don't know if you remember anybody, but sometimes people do. But you were always, you were ready to learn. But sometimes people do have a problem. Um,
Mhm.
their idea didn't get forward and they're going to get all upset. But I think
Mhm.
that that's something you had either all a good product designer has already learned. We a
Mhm.
good graphic designer knows we're not going to get our way all the time, right?
Yeah, and that's something that I've had to relay to a few of coworkers over the years. Actually, when at EverPi, I got to a point where I did have a couple of direct reports, and one of the people I had was a more traditional graphic designer who was still operating in. She worked in the product department with us, but she was definitely more of a visual graphic design person because her main job was, prepping files and cutting out images, producing illustrations and stuff like that. And yeah, there would be times where critique would be hard because, she would feel like it was a reflection of herself on that. And, we came to an agreement that like, this is just work, that we're just getting paid for this. It's good to have pride in what you do, but, she had art that she would do at home. I was like,
Mm.
that's where you should be like most comfortable with. And here at work, everybody just has to let it go and just work with what they've got because you're not always going to have your greatest thing that you want. Sometimes it's going to be that little corporate looking guy that everybody doesn't like, but it gets the
The
job done
client
and
wants it, right?
the
Yeah.
client wants it. Yeah. And so we just have to work with it. And once you let go of it, then you can figure out like, where can I put my joy back in?
Mm.
There were lots of little times where I would be working on things and I wouldn't necessarily like the material that I was working on, but then I would find instances that I would be like, hey, it'd be really fun if I did like this or something like
Mhm.
that. And talking to my creative director on whether or not that would be okay and appropriate. And, just finding my own instances of fun,
Yeah.
which would translate for the user as well.
Yeah. So from Everfi, which it was small, you were maybe the second or
Mhm.
third. I think you had told me there were two
Yeah,
kind of design people that came in at the same time as you, and you were under one
correct. Yeah.
creative. So it was still a small company, but it grew, and you were there for a few years, and then you went to Claire.
Yeah. So left Everfi and went to Claire. Much different environment. Unfortunately, there were some moves that the higher ups did that weren't very conducive to a cohesive product department. But that's actually where I met another former USA alum, Jessie McNeese, who is incredible, and had a lot of fun working with her and learning a lot from her as well because she entered the product space a lot earlier than I did, and so she had more direct knowledge with that sort of stuff. And so getting to learn from her was fantastic. But the user base there was a whole lot different because, like I said, at EverFi, it was mostly dealing with schools and just adults on their own time doing things. Whereas Claire, being a banking app, you're always on all the time. There, even though the place would shut down on the holidays and stuff like that, somebody was still working and still doing stuff. And so there were times where I would get messaged on a weekend or during a holiday being like, hey, there's some kind of mix up happening here. Can you produce a quick screen for the developers to fix it or something like that? Just very different user base, very different client base there because your client is, well, they were a bit weird too because it wasn't a pure bank. It was another one of those things where, uh, because Clear's thing was they provided on-demand pay for users free
Mm.
of charge, and so it was really helpful for teachers because there are some counties around the United States where teachers only get paid once a month, and
Me.
yeah, that's extremely hard to do. Whereas Claire, if Dan were to bank with Claire, when she clocked out at the end of the day, she could have access to up to 50% of what she made that day, up to a certain point for the month, and then all that would come out at the end of the month, and all that. So, but as a result, a lot of what I did was, one, working on flows and graphics that made it very clear to users, like
So explain
how
what a
much.
flow is, just in
Okay,
case
so
somebody
yeah,
is totally new.
right.
What would that
So
be?
yeah, so a flow is within design, if you're working on a poster, that's your poster. It's done and you move it on. A flow would be more like thinking about like a campaign. How does that poster relate to that banner ad over there? And how can we connect them together rather than just visually? And so a flow in product design is quite literally usually stems from what's called a user story. And a user story is usually instructed in a way, quite literally, like I I would like to be able to check my savings account in a way that's easy. That's an example of a user story. It's first person because it's supposed to be coming from a user and it's supposed to be illustrating a problem that needs to be solved. And so then a flow to solve that would go from, point of entry from logging into the app all the way to the end result of them clearly being able to reach their savings account, be able to at a glance know what is in their savings account, maybe what debits are pending, stuff like that. So end to end, or usually they would call it sometimes wireframing is
Mm-hmm.
another way of putting it. But wireframing usually can really denote like kind of like the more bare bones thing where you're just like scribbling on paper, trying to just get a point across. Usually wireframing is more for like a new idea
Mm-hmm.
that's being had and you're in the very early stages, whereas flows are the finalized things that you can then hand off to a developer who will understand like, okay, I see what's happening here. I now need to work on this and these parts and pieces to make this happen.
And at this point, in this was when you and I talked the other day, you were talking about how, well, when we first started, we were using Photoshop or Illustrator to
Hmm.
do some
Yeah.
of these flows. And now, and then Sketch came around and
Hmm.
then Figma. And
Yeah.
so,
No, Figma.
so
And
that
and
we're,
and not InDesign, XD, Adobe
mhm.
XD
Oh,
was
yeah,
the other one.
Adobe XD.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but you've had to continually learn new
Hmm.
platforms but to create flows or to create these um user stories, you would create them in those different
Yeah.
platforms
In
because
those
it's
mediums. Yeah.
easier to
Hmm.
hand it off to the developer at that point.
Right. Yeah. 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 So Photoshop back in the day, Photoshop still is like the grouping and layering is can get ornery whenever you're trying to do bigger things. And then Illustrator was better, but very similar, where you had all your artboards. And I think at a point Photoshop also had artboards, which was handy. But Illustrator was a bit more freeform, being able to put things in the margins of the artboards. But yeah, Sketch was a big game changer because mainly the reason why Sketch was a big game changer was less to do with um, being able to lay things out. It was more to do with the fact that you could set up a file, a dedicated file that was called your theme. And so that file would have all of the information for like all of the colors that you need to use, all of the fonts that you need to use, what a standard button should look
And
like, what,
that is like
yeah,
in Figma is just so easy. You don't have to keep redrawing it. You're like, just plop
exactly.
this. So it
Yeah,
made the for you efficiency. It was
yes.
so much easier for you to create those
Right.
flows, right?
Yeah. And especially because like we started with Sketch at Everfi, and at the time at Everfi, anytime a new product would come along, the sales department would always affix the word new to it. So new theme, new theme, new theme. And so we were constantly having to produce new themes, and Sketch made that a lot easier. But where Figma took that one step further was that Figma was a purely collaborative environment, whereas Sketch it was all file based. And so if somebody was in a file, even if it was on the cloud,
Right.
and somebody else tried to jump in, it could potentially mess things up on like whose saves inherited what and all that. Whereas Figma, what you see is up there at all times. It's constantly saving. It's purely on the cloud. Everybody can get in there. And it gave you better controls for the theming as well, because you could have multiple theme files. You could have like a company theme file that has all of the company branding, and then you could have a product line theme file that has theming for that specific product, and so on and so forth. It
Or
just made
even
things so
seasonal,
much
like
easier.
if you were
Hmm.
working on a brand that had seasonal colors, you could
Oh
just
yeah,
bring in those new seasonal colors for, and
yeah,
you could just say apply it to these things because these, and it
and that
just
is
made things
especially true
so much
now.
easier, right?
Yeah, yeah, because of I think it was about a year or 2 years ago, they introduced variables, and variable theming made things a whole lot easier, where you could literally have a separate theme variable that was all like you said, like all of like the fall colors or something like that. And you could take an entire flow and with one click switch that theming right then and there, and all the variables would change accordingly as necessary. And it's incredible stuff. And they're always improving it too, which is it's you're just always having to learn new things, but Figma does it in a way that is just very intuitive and helpful, and there's just so many resources out there to learn. you know
And it was a really good tool for working as that in between um for the developer, so you can create
Hmm.
things really easy for them to be able to also use. You're taking
Hmm.
the writer, you're taking the
Right.
SME. You
The
taught me
SME,
new
yeah.
words. Yeah. So
Yeah.
those things, and then you're able to put them in there and then give it to the developer, and then they also have
Yes.
things that they can work with, which I think is great.
Exactly.
But it's
Yeah.
not an ad for Figma, but way to go, Figma.
It's
Keep going.
not. And actually, I will say one place where visual designers do actually have a leg up is I see a disturbing trend of people doing everything in Figma, including like illustration. And nowadays, there's actually plugins that give you some Photoshop-like capabilities within Figma. And that's fine. It's just when it's not always clear for developers where they're supposed to get assets from, you can run
Mm.
into issues, because I've definitely had instances where I would be uh, going through a product that had just been finished, and I was doing QA on it, quality assurance on it, just going through page by page, making sure everything clicks correctly, everything looks good. I would notice that images would have little ratio markers in them. I was like, wait, that shouldn't be there. That's how I have it set up in Figma. But the actual files that I produced and handed off don't have that on there. What gives? Come to find out, the developers that were doing that had come from a different shop, where they worked with the designers where everything in Figma was the final piece. And so it was incumbent on the developers to then export their own assets out of Figma, which is easy. But at that point in time, we just weren't doing that. We were producing them separately, because we went through a lot of stock art at the time at Everfi, and so uh, handing that off to them was just a lot easier, because we had the resources to color correct in batch, for them, rather than having to do it all in Figma.
But it's just standard operating procedures for Everfi, and they may be different
Hmm.
for a different one, but you do
Hmm.
have to have that conversation with your developer. Okay, so going
Yeah.
back to, so then Claire, then what?
So from Claire, I then went to Rising Team, which was a bit more of an ed tech company, very similar to Everfi, where it's all just, the materials are uh, things like team building exercises and stuff like that. But the big difference is where Everfi was very much individually based, even for the corporate pieces that we made. Rising Team was more collaborative based, and so we had that extra layer of syncing between, say, Diane's browser and my browser, which was one of the big things that I worked on, was having that capability. Because when I first started, everybody in the Zoom call had to click at the same time, moving to the next page, and that got
Oh,
arduous at times. But but yeah, that product was very different because we had no SMEs, we had no copywriters, so there were often a lot of times where I was having to do writing myself, which yeah, I'm not effective at, and often had to do a little bit of research myself as well on some of the things that we were doing because it was, the the product idea at Rising Team was that, if a team at a company may be having some interpersonal issues, they might bring in an outside consultant to hold a workshop with that team or something to do some team building exercises. And what Rising Team specializes in is making the team lead or the lead person a temporary expert and facilitator to be able to do what an external person would do, but just in their own time in with their own team. And so the ranges of the product went anywhere from like 30 minutes to 2 hours, which was, when I came in, I told them like that's really long. Nobody in the corporate world has a 2 hour meeting that they can just be okay with once a month doing. Like that's a lot to ask of people. But yeah, it was like I said, it was just very different problems to solve. Like I said, the synchronicity uh, between the team lead and the other users was a big thing that we worked on. And solving that, we took a lot of work with the developers because it wasn't like we were doing that at the onset. We had a huge backlog of products that were needing us to go through piece by piece and seeing like, okay, does giving the team lead the ability to move everybody here make sense? Or do we need to have this be a pause point? Do we need to add extra language here to alert people as to what's going to happen here?
mm,
And especially because there were often a lot of activities where you did have to do them on your own, and there would be multiple pages within that. And so, how do we catch everybody at the end
mm.
to make sure that when they're done, everybody's in the right spot so that then the team lead can move on? And how do we alert the team lead that everybody's ready? Stuff like that.
That's
Very different changes.
yeah, but it's interesting, and it's just thinking about all the different parts that we may take for granted in our user experience of a product, or
Mm-hmm.
even when we're going through a course or we're learning, like, how do you find your savings account? Like, somebody
Right.
had to really think about, oh, I shouldn't be hunting for where to push to
Right.
find this thing. Okay,
Yeah.
so when you're looking for jobs, what type of experience do you need to have to be able to apply for a job that is a product design position?
I think ultimately, probably the most important would be having experience with a program like Figma. Figma is currently the gold standard. And honestly, like if you can get in and work with that and be comfortable with working with themes and symbols and components and all that sort of stuff, that is the hands down the most important thing because visually your colors, your fonts,
Right.
spacing and what looks right, what does not look right. Just being able to build the pages themselves is probably definitely the most important part, especially for coming in as a junior person,
What ab-
because oh, go ahead.
what about, I don't want to, because what?
Because you're junior,
Oh,
you're usually not going to have to be solving all of these other problems. That's experience that will come as you continue to work on these things. Really, just like when I was a production artist
right.
at Red Square, I knew Photoshop, I knew Illustrator, and I knew all these other things, but I was not like our other like lead designers who had the vision and drive to like make some of the key art and come up with the campaigns and stuff like that. That is something that I learned from working on them and seeing what they were doing and being like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I could do something like that. But having that base of just knowing the software was really what was able to get me in the door.
So what if you were somebody more at your level? They don't really want to come in as a entry level, but
Mhm.
they've been out, they've been working, they've been a professional, and maybe it's a pivot point. Maybe they
Yeah.
already know Figma, but what's important, like a soft skill that they would need to know? Because you and I talked about it's a lot of thinking, it's a lot of
Mhm.
solving, like
Yeah.
because those things I think are also important. Yes, it's good
Yeah.
to know the program, but at some point you aren't maybe doing all the production. You're guiding, you're seeing where the holes are, and you're
Right.
pointing people um to fix those things. So what would be
Yeah.
like an important part of what your job is as a product designer
Mhm.
that would be something you would want to communicate in an interview?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
I'm sorry I didn't write that down in our
No,
questions.
it's fine. No, it's fine. I would say, I mean, you kind of touched on it right there, that interpersonal, it's called something different in product world, and it's leaving me right now, but
Empathy?
it's no, like not empathy, although empathy always helps. I will stand by that. But interdepartmental work. So, being able to talk about like how you've maybe taken a campaign start to finish, working with if there was a digital component of it, working with the developers on and getting that done and being able to show that you are able to communicate your vision and your work in a
Mm.
way that like a print shop can pick it up and know what needs to be done, or like I said, like a if you're working with a development vendor, for say like a digital portion of a campaign that you've worked on, just being able to talk about how uh, you're able to pass things along and make sure that everybody has what they need, and be able to ask the question of like, does everybody have what they need? And if they don't, come to me and I can work with you on that. The relationships are a big part of it. I would say, just because uh, it's so much different from freelance, where you're hired as a single person to do all these things. When you're a part of a product team, it's definitely a more arms than you know what to do with, because you're not supposed to do all that stuff. I think the only time you are considered to be that type of person is if the keywords are like full stack.
Hmm.
And usually that's in terms of like a developer. They're usually referred to as full stack. And those are people that, yes, they can code, but they also can lay things out. They can also design things, and they know a bit or two about color, to where, it's not going to be gray boxes and white, yeah, white backgrounds and black text everywhere. It'll actually have some interest to it.
So
So,
what?
yeah.
So one thing I asked you the other day, and I want to ask you this here, like you've done things that were smaller teams, and then some of
Mhm.
them have grown. So you have bigger companies you've worked for, smaller. You've done some remote, fully remote jobs. You've done some where you're going in the office. Um, you know, sometimes we can get a bad taste in our mouth from one experience, but I think it may make you so you're like, oh, I don't ever want to. I mean, I never want to do COVID again. Never, ever.
Yeah, yeah,
Nobody wants to do
absolutely.
that. But
Right.
there are maybe some portions of things that we were doing then that have stuck around. A lot of people now can work remote.
Mhm.
Um, when you're thinking about startups and
Mhm.
some of the maybe all these companies haven't maybe they didn't have a SME, or they didn't, like some of those kind of red flags that now but when you were going in you didn't really always know the
Mhm.
things to look out for. Because I asked you, I was like, well, does this mean, would you go for another startup, or do
Mhm.
you want to work for somebody who's more established?
Yeah.
um and you had a great answer, so you can tell them your
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. So, working for startups. So Everfi, was a startup, but it was a case where they knew what they needed going into it. It may not have been a product department made by product people, but they understood, like, okay, graphic people do this, product people do that, developers do this, and we need writers and stuff like that. other startups are a lot scrappier and a lot smaller. And what I've found, having done now some smaller startups that are a bit scrappier, is that when they produce these listings for these positions, it's understood that like, yeah, you're gonna have to wear a lot of hats. Everybody understands that with startups, but where they may not fully understand is like what they actually do need. And so what I've learned in doing some smaller startups and what I will carry with me going forward is regaining my comfortability with not knowing and
Mm,
being able to call out things of just like, hey, I know I've got this ticket to do this thing. But while I was reviewing it and thinking about it, I realized that, X, Y, and Z might be considerations that I'm not as familiar with. I can do the research to figure that out, but I'm just going to be upfront that these are not my areas of expertise, and being upfront about not just running off and doing it
mm.
is the main thing because uh I don't remember where I've heard this, but it's a saying that says hard work is only rewarded with more work. And
Mm.
so if you train others that they can throw whatever at you and you're just going to go and do it and figure it out and not complain because you feel like it's maybe not your place to call out that you weren't given all the information, then they're just going to continue to do that for you to you, and you're just going to burn yourself out because now you're doing the job of maybe two, three other people that should be a part of your team. A person like a scrum master that's helping you manage your products and your time, a writer that's helping you not have to worry about the writing so you can just focus on the flow and the graphics, or a SME that's going to be there to tell you like, hey, legally you can't say that because
Right.
that's not okay, you know and and by having that comfortability, it's not saying like, oh, I'm absolutely never going to do this, not going to do this, but by raising your hand and being like, hey, I can do this and I will do this, but I just want to identify that, there's more consideration here than what you gave me.
Mm.
And that there will come a time that if this is the route that we need to go, if these types of things are going to continue to come up, it would be a good consideration that we hire somebody to fill XYZ role because I cannot continue to do this
If
at
you're
my
if
level.
they're asking you to write, right, or
Yeah,
come right,
right,
or do something that is,
right,
you can do some, but
right.
it would be better for them. You would have less revisions, or it would be, a good
Less,
writer, good
yeah,
copywriter would.
yeah.
It's going to help
It,
them in the end to do that.
Exactly. And, and these days with AI, it's a little bit of a pitfall because like I've definitely run into it where people will tell me like, oh, well, just use AI to fill in the blanks. I'm like, okay, but like people are paid to do this. This is a job that humans should be doing,
And it's for a reason, right?
and
Because
it's for a
AI is
reason.
leaving
Yeah.
some things out there.
Yeah.
It's not
They're
the end all be all solution.
right.
Right.
It's really not. You still need that human touch because otherwise it feels like it came from AI.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you were so some of these other jobs, that if maybe it was a scrappy team, if
Hmm.
you were interviewing and they were like, "We don't have a blank," you would be like,
Hmm.
"Red flag, red flag." What would be some of those things?
Yeah, I actually was looking at a job posting a while back where it was one of those jobs where, the red flags for me is like anytime they talk about ninjas or unicorns and stuff like that, I'm just like, okay, here we go. Or like we're a family, things like that. But the thing that
You're
really
like, "I've
struck
got a
out,
family. I don't need another family."
right. Yeah. And the thing that really struck out to me was like the you'll never section. They formatted in a weird way, but like in the you'll never section, it was things like you'll never work with jerks, you'll never be a jerk. And then, but one of them was you'll never work with product managers because we don't have any. And I sat there and I stared at that for a moment. It's like, what? I don't really know what that means because a product manager is a very important person because they're the ones that are going to help you to produce those user stories, and not just produce the user stories of like what's necessary, but like be able to help hold all the extra puzzle pieces of like, maybe a different initiative that the development team is working on that may not be directly related to product right then and there, but it will be in the future. And so how can we prep ahead of time? And so seeing stuff like that and asking questions like that, like what kind of, team setup do you have at your company, is very helpful to know, like, how much extra work am I going to need to do, and am I comfortable with doing that extra work here? you know
Right.
and,
Right.
and also, monetarily being able to identify that, like, hey, I'm not a product manager, but if I'm going to be doing the work of a product manager in addition to my product work, I
That's worth
would
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's worth something, because that's an entire other career, that
Right.
people do and are very effective at. And so, I will need some some monetary compensation there to ensure that I'm able to do my best.
Right. Right. Okay. So, are there any questions that you try to ask if you're interviewing so that that would give somebody else that is listening,
Mhm.
like ask this, and it could be just a
Mhm.
general, but like maybe it has to do with remote or how
Yeah,
um things come in or whatever. What would you
yeah.
ask?
A couple good ones. One would be like, what has a change leadership has implemented recently that has come from team feedback? Is
Mm,
a good one, because then it lets you know how receptive leadership is to the woes of the team, because you don't want to join a team that's just going to be left in the dark and constantly wondering when you're going to get help or something like that. That's a useful one. Another one is kind of a bit of a social engineering question, which is something to the effect of, if I was uh, if I was working today, how would you use me on the team? And
mm,
so that way you're shifting their viewpoint of you as a candidate and into you as an employee. And so it just kind of helps to shift their brain a little bit towards like, well, how would I use this person?
oh, that's a
What
great idea.
of what I've seen, of what they've shown me, like how could I use them on this team or that team? It doesn't mean they're necessarily going to hire you in that moment, but it gets them thinking of like, what? Seeing like the little bits of animation work that he's done, maybe we can work that in here for some user delight. Um, and then there was a third one that I had, but I'm drawing a blank on.
It's okay. It's okay. So we had talked about, so as you have gone up we're in the lightning round, as
Okay.
you've gone up in as a product designer, you've spent more years in it. What is overseeing a product? It's not you being product manager, I don't think. It's
Mhm.
overseeing a product. What does that look like? What does a typical day look like if that was what you were doing?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on the company, but at
What would
you
be your
know at,
favorite way to be
yeah.
if you could do, because I know
Well,
some companies it's very different. But if you were
yeah, it's
managing it, what would you want it to be like?
so my preferred mode of operation is working on products where each product is its own contained piece that gets shipped out. So something like an Everfi or like Rising Team, where each lesson was an
Mm,
individual product, or each lesson was a part of a larger product that was going to get shipped out later. And so overseeing it would usually come in the form of like, uh, I was very lucky enough to work with like a scrum master. And so like every week we would have what was called a stand up. And a stand up is just a quick 15-minute. Everybody talks about like, this is what I have on my docket for the week.
mm,
And this is where I'm at with those. These are the concerns I might have. And usually from a stand up, you can generally see like, okay, maybe there's some problem areas. I need to go out and reach out to these people. Um, checking in with the developers, because depending on the environment you work with, there are two modes of operation. Waterfall is very similar to what you may work with in a traditional like design environment where uh, one piece gets worked on, gets passed along, gets worked on, passed along, and on down you go. Whereas the other mode, which the term is completely lost me, but it's cyclical, where uh, the developers, even though they don't have necessarily your part of it, they're already programming stuff and getting something going while you're working on the design work. And then when you slot it in to their workflow, they start working on it. And you start to see problems of like, okay, now that
Right.
this is happening, I need to take that piece back out and start working on it and fix it, so that the developers
Agile?
agile. That's the one. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I wanted to say iterative, but like I was like, I know that's not
What's
right.
Scrum Master mean?
Okay, so Scrum, I'm pretty sure it's an acronym. I don't know, but it comes from it's just a product management style. There's a couple of them out there, but it's one that I'm definitely most familiar with, where uh, it's not totally adversarial, like everybody is trying to like fight each other, but your time
Hmm.
is sacrosanct, and you are very protective of your time. And so when new tasks come up, there will be a scrum planning where you'll be part of a team and you'll be like, all right, that ticket right there, that is asking a designer to do XYZ. I know that's going to take at least 8 hours for them to do. So a day of solid work for that person doesn't mean they'll need to do it throughout the course of a day, but for a sprint, which in our case was a 2 week sprint, that 8 hours would then get slotted into we didn't do 40-hour work weeks for our teams. It was more like 38 because we knew meetings would crop up. So
Hmm.
in the, 76 hours for those 2 weeks, that 8 hours will now take up that chunk, and
Mm.
so on. And so Scrum is it's just a part of or a way of going about agile development that is kind of helpful, because like there are there are things called like level of effort. That's where you're saying like, okay, that would take 8 hours, that may take 16 hours. There's sizing for like the kind of more amorphous things, like they do it by t-shirt size in some cases. So like a medium t-shirt size will have overarching number of hours that then all of the pieces that go into making it need to make sure that they don't exceed that. And if
Hmm.
they do, then either it needs to go up in size, or the scope of what's being asked for that t-shirt needs to come down and pared down. And so it's a very combative environment, but in a good way. Like it's to your benefit,
Yeah, they're
because
protecting you.
yeah, you're protecting yourself because you're saying like that's going to take X number of hours, but also you're protecting others because you don't you prevent scope creep, and you just keep everything honest. And it's not to say that you won't ever be able to go back and add in things that maybe had to get cut because it's an agile experience. But it just really kind of depends on the place that you work, on how much appetite they have to actually go back and make changes to products.
So what I'm going to ask you two out of order.
Yeah.
Or three more questions. One, what type of companies hire product designers?
Ooh, a lot currently.
So
uh,
more than what we would normally think, I think, correct?
yeah, I would say so. So anything that has an app component or a shop component usually has some type of product designers, because bringing people into a shop and buying a thing requires if they're not using something like a regular old Shopify, like off the shelf uh, experience, they need product designers and UX designers to come in and help, draw people into the required experience, which is spend money, buy a thing, or whether that's a physical product or a digital product like a subscription or
Right.
anything like that. And any app, again, is another thing where if they're not using some pre-canned thing off the internet, if it's more bespoke, they need product designers for that. And then in some realms that maybe are, less visual is inventory management types of things, like so shipping companies, stuff like that. They need product designers to ensure that, you know, um, I mean,
Just the
depends, obviously.
logistics
Yeah.
sort of
But
that
yeah,
go
just the
into.
logistics of like, all of the data visualization of just like, how much of a thing do we have here? Where is it? How, like, when is it meant to go? And all that sort of stuff is, falls into the realm of product design. It's a lot less sexy because, you're not going to be making fun graphics all the time for it,
Right.
but it's good work. And the nice thing is it all kind of scales up and down. You can pretty regularly move between, they prefer you to have experience, and they'll say it a lot of times in job posting, but they'll prefer fintech experience or ed tech experience or inventory management experience.
Hmm.
But that's not to say that
You
you're
can't.
barred
Right.
from entry. Yeah,
You
because
can
like,
cross that bridge.
yeah, you can cross that bridge, and doesn't mean you'll always get the interview, but when you're in the interview, usually when you're doing a portfolio review of the work that you've done, you can explain, like, if you do your research ahead of time to see what their product is like, you can then draw the lines and lead them from like, hey, I've done this for this company before. I know it's not a direct analog, but the problem I was solving here is
Is
very
the
similar
same.
to
Yeah.
the type of thing that you're
Yeah.
doing here.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
yeah, when it's not as visual, it's a little bit more amorphous. You can kind of talk about things in a different way of just like,
But it's
because
the
really,
thinking that goes into it,
yeah,
right? It's the
it's
design
all,
thinking part of
yeah,
user
design is,
experience or the product and the
yeah,
attraction, and the other is just kind of the
yeah,
lipstick on the pig sometimes.
yeah, the lipstick on the pig, yeah, the underwear on outside of the clothes.
Right. That's one of my analogies. Yep. I'm glad that was helpful for you in
One of my
your thing.
favorites.
Okay, so one you had talked to me about this one product, and I thought, oh, I'm going to ask everybody this. So, what has been
Yeah,
your favorite project and or proudest achievement thus far as a
yeah.
product designer?
Definitely my favorite was a product I worked on called WordForce. And that's an acronym for World Orbiting Reading Defense Force. And that was an idea I came up with, where it was again one of those things where I just had my ear open, and I, heard people a couple desks over talk about a thing, and I was like, that's a cool initiative I'd like to be a part of, and just talking to people about it, and kind
This
of
was
got
for
my,
kids, right? So it was like
yeah. So so what the product was, or is, and it's still live today, is it's an early literacy program for pre-K up to, first, second grade ish, like very early literacy, where the initial product was, it's supposed to be like a website for teachers to give kids to in their classroom to go, like maybe they finished up something ahead of time and they need to work on their reading. Teacher can sit them down, they can play these games and learn, phonetical, linguistic skills, in reading and pronunciation, learning like beginning sounds, end sounds, stuff like that. But it was always meant to be in a classroom environment where a teacher can then supplement and help. It was never meant to be its own thing.
solo. Uh huh.
Yeah, and so my big one of my big achievements there was uh just getting to work on it and launch it, but getting to work with all the people on it, because it was just such a different experience, like super visual. The whole thing is a cartoon. And in fact, the one of the designers that I got to work with, because we were working with a vendor at the time, because we didn't have the capabilities to build this in-house, but come to find out, had worked on a cartoon that I used to love on Cartoon Network called Kablam. And we're still good friends to this day. But getting to work with him, and all of the visuals kind of came from him and me working together to make it work together. And it was successful enough to where Truist Bank actually gave us $1 million to revamp it, and not only just revamp it, but make an app, a companion app for it, so that kids on an iPad at home could do it, because they felt so strongly in the product that the $1 million injection was to then take it from an in-school supplemental experience to now they want it to be something that parents can give to their
Mm.
kids, and it gives them enough education on its own to take and run with it. And so that was an incredible experience, because not only did it mean that we got to go back and fix a lot of the games that we worked on, because some of them were not not good for children. Adults had troubles with them. So working with that, but I actually got to fly out to LA like 3 times to actually direct shoots where, we had like a very Sesame Street style setup where we had these teachers that were like talking through, and I had to like storyboard out all these things of what they needed to be saying and doing, and then working with an animation studio to bring in the characters and have them interact with the people. It was just a really, really, really cool experience, and getting to work with everybody on it was just incredible. And
That's
I've
awesome.
I've, I've been chasing that ever since.
So it seems like that's like I can see a direct correlation where that advertising background comes in, because a
Hmm.
lot of times you have to be not just a static designer, you have to have the ability to start thinking in motion or thinking in
Hmm.
a story, a longer story. And I
Right.
think you've been able to do that super successful. All right. So, last
Yeah.
question, Drew, and then I'm going to share how
Hmm.
people can get in touch with you. What is
Yeah.
next for you? Do you have a big dream? So, you kind of just mentioned that you're always chasing that word
Yeah.
force kind of type of project or a company.
Hmm.
Do you have a big dream of a company or type of project that you would like to work on?
That's definitely something I'm still figuring out. But definitely like want to get in back into ed tech personally,
Mm,
and it's specifically like kids ed tech. I was just looking at, because I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. And so they're in elementary school right now, and I get to see a lot of the stuff that they interact with. And so I've been reaching out to companies like Brain Pop, to work with them, because like their product is really fun and good, but it's one that, could use a revamp, and I would love to be that person to come in and work on that with them. And actually come to find out that uh, the company that owns the majority share of Lego also owns Brain Pop. So in my mind, I'd be like, oh, it'd be kind of like I'm working with Lego. That'd be neat,
yeah.
you know.
Well,
Um,
you've been
but
very clear on you have 10, 5, and now you're about to have another, right? So
about to have
you're
a
a
third. Yep.
5 year 5 year
Yeah, 5 year
blocks.
gap. Yep, yep, yep. Very regimented kids. Yep.
Yes.
And they my firstborn came about when I was 30, so very very solid number system there, because I'm going to be 40 this year and he's 10, he's 5.
That's awesome.
But
So,
yeah, no, just always looking for, I just want to do interesting things mostly. And I'm just thankfully in a position, where I have enough experience under my belt, and doing the things that like I can try to push for more of those types of things that are just more experiential and bigger, rather than having to work on like, you know, how should this button look,
or the logistics part on the shipping
Yeah,
company, right?
right. Yeah,
Well, Drew,
exactly.
thank you so much. I want everybody to be able to contact you or reach out. And your website, your last name is Hard, which I always
Mhm.
thought was awesome because your name was Drew Hard. And I always thought, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, you should push really hard and break,
Yeah.
pencil lead or something in
Yeah.
interviews. That would be so funny. But so hard.click.
Mhm.
CLICK, just like normal.
Yep.
And then on LinkedIn, Drew Hard. So you go to
Just move on.
LinkedIn, DREWHARD. So super easy. I can't believe
Mhm.
you got that easy LinkedIn. I
I
mean,
was very early in on that, on a
yes,
lot of that.
way to go.
So,
But that's the best way people can get in touch with you. And if they
mhm.
have questions or they just want to hire you for an ed tech job, probably,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
But I appreciate it. I love that you've done so well and that you have done some really interesting things from this meager little I think we have a great school, but we have a, small little mighty department.
Right.
But that you've taken what we taught you and you've just gone and done so many great things. And
Mhm.
I love that. So I'm super
Yeah.
proud of you. And whenever you're
And
back in town, holler and I'll take you to lunch.
yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. It's definitely, reliving everything. It makes me realize like, oh, I have done a lot. It's kind of crazy, because when I'm looking for stuff, I don't really think about it in those terms. So it's been really enjoyable.
Yeah, we don't realize how fast time goes, right?
Yeah.
But it's
Yep.
also it's interesting to hear you say, I mean, you've really worked in the financial sector, you've worked in the education, and it's like, okay, you tried, and then you find what you more gravitate towards. And I see
Mhm.
that, like you have
No, definitely. Yeah.
that personality of, and you have great energy, and so I totally see how that would be like an awesome place for you where they could use your soft skills. You also are very empathetic, where you can think about the user and you want to make it easier for them. So I think empathy is one of your
Right.
superpowers. But I think that sometimes we don't know what we would like or what we don't like until we try
Yeah.
in that. And so sometimes it's good to just take a position that is for somebody who's thinking about it. Maybe
Hmm.
the next position, like when I asked you, would you ever go to startups? If
Yeah.
you had a
Yeah.
bad experience with one, would you go?
Hmm.
And you said yes. You know that they're
Hmm.
different, and I think that's
Yeah.
great. So I will never eat mushrooms again. I mean, not that I've ate mushrooms like for drugs, not that kind of mushroom. I just don't like mushrooms. I've tried them.
Yeah.
I don't like the texture.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a random weird thing. Anyway, but Drew, thank you. Everybody, check his website out, hard.click, and connect with him on LinkedIn at
Yep.
Drew Hard. All
Yep.
right.
Absolutely.
I'm
Thanks
going
for
to hit,
having me.
absolutely. Thank you. And I'm going to hit stop.